Hey, peace. It's Benjamin again. I want to talk about mechanisms of control. Uh, we live, we are currently on a trajectory to everlasting life, and we've gone through a space, place, and time where we had to understand everything that was needed in order for us to sustain our eternity, our individual and collective eternity. When I say we, I mean humanity. And so, one of the things that has restricted our eternal beingness is mechanisms of control. One of the first mechanisms of control I want to talk about is economics, specifically money. Money was created during, or came about during the Babylonian times. When we trace money back to Sumer, the Sumerians, the Babylonians were the first people to use coinage, and that started a new trajectory that entered us into this trajectory, this dark trajectory. When money was created, it altered the way of life. So instead of people depending on people for their gifts and talents, there created a medium of exchange. And so instead of me coming to you for directly for something and us exchanging, I had to now I had a medium for it. I had this coin that I could collect, and as a result that created a hierarchy, a vertical hierarchy. So instead of us kind of exchanging and being a collaborative, a community type of way, now there was this medium put into place that altered relationships. And the Bible talks about at the height of Babylon, how I believe it was King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that was interpreted by Daniel, and the dream prophesied that there were going to be successive kingdoms that took on this way of living, this way of exchange, and would diminish as a result. Eventually, this whole system of life, the system of living, would eventually diminish, and in its place will be erected this everlasting kingdom. And the moral of that story is what we've learned, and when I say we, I mean humanity, what we learned as a result of everything that transpired as a result of this way of life being implemented. And it started with money, but what the real medium is humanity chasing after each individual individual's own way of life, as opposed to the greater good of the whole. And so since that time up until now, we've gone literally every single way to get back to where we started from, so we can begin building a eternal way of existing here on earth. In the book of Daniel, Daniel interprets the dream, and the dream, I believe it's King Nebuchadnezzar has his dream of a statue, and it's a pretty popular dream. It's often interpreted, but the The statue has different materials. It's built of different materials. The head is gold. Then it goes from silver, then bronze, then stone, and then stone mixed with clay. And they're different. There are two different interpretations. I believe the modern interpretation says it's like Babylonian, and Medo-Persia, and different things like that. But if you Medo-Persia and Babylon are basically this one and the same. They're synonymous. They're like Rome went through different iterations of the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic, and so on and so forth. So they're one and the same. Another interpretation, and what I believe to be true of the dream is the statue represents the time of Babylonian Empire to the U.S. And if we trace back U.S. Civilization, it's rooted in Babylonian ways, Babylonian lore. And so the end of the dream basically says that a rock is going to come crash into the statue and then shatter the statue into like dust, and the dust is going to scatter every which way, and then the mountain's going to be put in place of this statue, and the mountain is going to last forever. And so what that dream means is that from our missteps, from humanity's missteps, we're going to learn from it. We're going to learn what not to do, and so that we can live forever. It is rooted in the fall of mankind, the story of Adam and Eve, the eating of the tree of good and evil. It's rooted in the curse or the punishment that man received afterwards of I don't call it verbatim, but in Genesis, the book of the Bible, Genesis, it's all it is very literal, but it's also very figurative as well. But anyway, but the mechanisms, but the first mechanism of control that started it, that got the ball rolling, was the change in economy. What the Babylonians did by creating coin was they created a medium of exchange that was put in between people. Before then, people could exchange freely amongst one another, and that's how civilization went. As a matter of fact, if you trace it back to Africa, that's how the African kingdoms kind of went. That's like the African culture. It's like, yo, you go to my man's, like he does this, blah 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 blah, what have you. So that's kind of how it went. And when if you actually look at Babylon, when you look at the story of Adam and Eve, and man was driven east of the garden, and look at from Babylon to India to China to Europe, you see all the way to America, you see a full circle, and that's basically the trajectory that we are on. And it's very important to say, and I guess this may be saved for a different video, but it's very important to say that the changes that we've gone through from exiting out of Africa in terms of humanity, or the not humanity, but the empires that ruled and governed the world from Africa to Babylon to I'll say India to China to Europe to North America, or the Americas. What we have to, like, what's important to know is that the same thing keeps occurring. So whether it be oppression, whether it be the mistakes that we make, whether it be the systems that we create, the same things have been occurring, but they've been occurring in a progressive way. Like we've made this. So we may have made this mistake, but we've learned from it and created a new system. And then once we've figured out the flaws in that system, we've progressed an advanced system. And so we are coming full circle. We are really at a point right now in humanity where we have the opportunity, where we have all the knowledge of our past mistakes, and we have an opportunity to recreate society in a just way where we can inherit an everlasting kingdom here on earth. But we really have to begin to sacrifice the illusion of the riches that exist in our current in the fading reality. When I say fading reality, I'm really talking about go back to like the 1960s, and that when you look at the civil rights movement, everything that the movement was about in terms of eradicating a unjust system and erecting a just one. That was the precipice of change. That was what marked the beginning of the end of an old way of life. And fast forward 60 years later? 50 years later. Is my math right? I don't know. Yeah, 50 years later, we are at a point where we are the new generation, right? And so we are the first of a new generation, of a new era. And what we have to do, our job in this new era, is to reprogram ourselves from the brainwashing of the previous generation, or the previous era. So by that I mean we have to realize the mechanisms of control. We have to realize the fallacies in the mechanisms of control. We have to realize how our lives have been impacted by the mechanisms of control. We have to realize how our lives have been impacted by the mechanisms of control. We have to realize how our thinking has been impacted by the mechanisms of control. And we have to reprogram ourselves. A lot of that requires that we really unplug from these mechanisms. And I know you're like, how do we do that? Well, if you really want to know, go to arkedenterprise.com, ARKEDENTERPRISE.com. You'll see on there you can join as a membership. The reason that is that we are all like, there's a spectrum of this change. There's this term called woke. And there's a spectrum of being woke, and then even after being woke, there's another stage after being woke, and that once you wake up, you begin to plan your day, or prepare. Before you plan your day, you prepare yourself for the day, and then you plan the day. Or plan your activity. And so there's spectrums, And so understanding that, like, some people are still asleep, some people are still waking up, and being woke and waking up can be a painful experience for some. Like, so if, for example, and this is a true story for me, like, if when I woke up, I was entrenched in an environment that wasn't conducive for life, and it was actually killing me, literally. And so so when I woke up, I had to discard that old way of life. And if you know anything about energy, in order, you have to energy is easily transferred. So in order for me to really renew myself, I had to cleanse my energy. So I had to, like, release all my old way of life, my old life completely. And I really didn't know how to go about that. So I deleted my Facebook page, my old Facebook page. I got rid of all my stuff. I got rid of everything. Like, I was just like, nah, y'all can have all this, because I was, for the first time, aware of what was needed to move forward. I'm not suggesting that you do that, because I don't, after doing it, I don't feel like that's necessary. But I do feel what is necessary is the renewing of the mind. And I'm going to keep referring back to Jesus, because Jesus was so ahead of his time. Well, no, he was right on time, to be honest with you. But what he said was, any man that comes to Christ is a new creature. And he talks about a renewing of the mind. And if we could put that in today's vernacular, that's being woke. That's waking up from a sleepy state. When I say sleepy state, I mean being programmed, connected to a system of living that is detrimental for all life. And what I mean specifically, I mean, if I could put a term on it, I mean corporate capitalism. I mean industrial military complex. I mean, those two in particular. Those two specifically. And I know it may seem counterintuitive, just to kind of bring home a point. When you go to the website for membership, there's a cost to sign up. And I know we talk about mechanisms of control being economics. I do want to make it clear that there to join this investment club, because to be clear, we are investing in a new way of life. To join this investment club, you can invest your time, you can invest your money, you can invest your resources, you can invest your talents, and you can invest your treasure. So it doesn't necessarily have to be money, but there has to be an investment being made for the future. Anything worthwhile is worth investing. But invest where we are. We all should invest where we are. So I do want to make that very clear. And what you're investing into is a new way of life, a program, a way to be reprogrammed that eliminates the old program and unlocks your original unique programming. That's what you're investing in. Just as a plug and promo for myself, I'm very good at selling other people's stuff. I'm very new to selling my own stuff, so y'all bear with me. But again, mechanisms of control. Just to bring it home, how money and modern economics is a popular mechanism of control. I was in church this past Sunday, and what the pastor said was, anything you can't take a break from, you're a slave to. And I want to hone in on the word grind and the hustle, those two words. Those two things you can't take breaks from. Matter of fact, the grind is what? 24/7. The hustle, what? Never stops. That's slavery. That's slavery put in the most savviest way. Carter G. Woodson said, if you control a man's thinking, you don't have to tell him to come to the back door. He's going to hustle his way to it. He's going to grind out a path for himself to come into the back door. And so let's be clear, we have to reprogram ourselves. A lot of like what we've inherited, and speaking very clearly and specifically to the Black community, what we've inherited in terms of our mentality is slavery. It's a mechanism of control. And I'm not saying anybody did it or there's a conspiracy theory for it, because it's God divine. Like, we've had to go through all this, and so that we can realize the error of our ways and recreate a new way. As a matter of fact, those that have been hit hardest are those that have been called that have some of the deepest callings to create change in the society that we see today. But that requires a different way of thinking. It requires love, the highest commandment. And so in order for us to tap into love, we have to begin to practice that. We have to tap into our own self-love, our own love of self. And a lot of that requires time to ourselves. And oftentimes we don't have that time because we're so connected to a system that requires all of our time, our attention, and our devotion at the risk of and at the detriment of ourselves. And so I just want to say, I just want to leave y'all with that. What are we working on? What are we working towards? What are we building? Are we programmed the right way? And what is the right way? And just want to offer y'all just some wisdom and some advice. The way that popular society says is not it. Working for corporate America or the corporate sense, corporate capitalism is not it. It's not. It really isn't. It really isn't. It really, really isn't. If you want to get an example, Amazon, Walmart. I don't want to just pick on them because they're not the only ones. Any and every industry that there is, that have big brands, they're destroying life, and that's just point blank. Period. Peace.